Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yeah, it's one of those. It really is one of those. And you know what? Fair play to those who got to the Vitality Stadium and back last night. There were no trains running afterwards, so people were either driving back in the middle of the night or they were staying over and spending their hard-earned money on watching that. It was rubbish. It was rubbish. Few little pointers before I get started. You might hear the odd snoring. That's not me falling asleep, or it might be viewers falling asleep. It is more likely, or just as likely, to be my dog Indy, who we're having a bit of a lads' night in. Everyone else is out tonight, so it's him and I. I didn't want him to be on his own downstairs, so he is on the end of the sofa, which is actually why I'm slightly pressed across when I normally sit roughly around there. But he is currently snoozing, so he could at any point wake up and have his say, or he could just knock everything off and it could be chaotic. And also ever so slightly smarter than I normally am, because it's press conference day, because after the joy of last night in Bournemouth, had to race back this morning in time for a morning press conference at Hotspur Way. So yes, I'm still in press conference mode, where I have to act a little bit more respectable than I really am. And look a little bit smarter than I normally like to be. But yeah, where to start? Where to start? I'm going to be a bit different. I'm going to start from the end. Well, technically what happened after the end of the game. Because I think there's a lot to be read and delved into from what happened after the game. So you might be aware by now that Ange Postecoglou, after the players, went over to the fans, the Tottenham travelling faithful, who were not best pleased, and understandably so, with the utter, almost said a bad word, utter rubbish that they were served up at the Vitality Stadium yesterday evening. Especially if you're going to put your time and effort into it and your money, you at least expect a certain level of performance, and it wasn't. And they let their feelings be known to first the players and then Ange Postecoglou. I've got this kind of abiding memory in my head of the end of it all, and there's this kind of weird irony to the fact that it was Jed Spence who came over and put a consoling hand on Ange Postecoglou's shoulder as he turned away from, let's be honest, a bit of a bruising encounter with the fans in a kind of a mental sense. And I just thought that was, for all the people for it to be Jed Spence. After pre-match, I'd asked about Jed, and he'd been a bit dismissive at Postecoglou. It wasn't the most glowing kind of review, and I just thought, in a way, it was pretty classy from Jed to kind of be over there and kind of just, I guess, it's almost like a little consoling, "You okay, boss?" kind of pat on the shoulder. But this is football. This is football. Just 12 days earlier, Postecoglou was making that same journey across the pitch at the Etihad Stadium, or 12 days before that. And, Spurs had just ended Man City's 52-game unbeaten run at home. They'd won 4-0. Everything was wonderful. Everything is awesome. And completely different. Fans applauding him kind of applauding them for their efforts. And here we are on Thursday night, last night. It was a weird way it started. So Son was making sure as captain that everyone was going to go over and applaud the fans for their efforts. And they did, but obviously the fans were in a bad mood, and understandably so. And there was lots of choice words uttered. We were on the other side of the pitch, but I could kind of see it all happening. And a few people saying, a bit of that, a bit of go away with some more colourful language than that. And a few people just letting them know their feelings. So there was this odd moment where they were applauding to begin with, the players that were there, or still there. And then they kind of had this moment, not like a standoff, but where they were just standing in a line, kind of listening. I don't know, it was listening to it, accepting it, taking on the chin, whatever you want to call it. But I took this photo and I looked back at it when I got back last night to my hotel room. And it had Pedro Porro in it, who some people said kind of wasn't happy and took some offence to some of the stuff said. I didn't see that, so that's not verified. Just some people I saw on social media were suggesting that were in the crowd. Yves Bissouma was another one. Radu Dragusin, James Maddison, Brennan Johnson, and young Lucas Berval was there as well. And you could just kind of see them. And I've seen another video showing them from the other side, and they are just kind of looking up and just like, I guess we have to take this, lads. That's fine. I know where everyone else had gone. Everyone else had kind of maybe applauded and done a little wheel away quickly, and these were the guys that were getting it. And I think Postecoglou saw that, and I think he kind of felt, I don't want the players to take all of this. I'm going to go over and take some of this on myself, which, look, it's admirable in a way, because I've seen certain people saying that, they should never even bothered going over to the fans kind of thing. But if they hadn't done it, everyone would have said, why didn't you go to the fans? So I think it was the right thing to do. And I also think it was the right thing, really, to accept what was coming after a performance like that. And it's probably not the worst thing to hear some of the stuff that was said. Some of it, I'm sure, veered over the line, and certainly with Postecoglou, it did. I heard some of what was being said on the videos, but to a degree, that was indeed, by the way, you can hear him kind of making a bit sigh. He wasn't happy. He wasn't happy at the performance at all. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to know how upset the fans are at your performance levels. I don't think that's the bad thing. So Postecoglou went over and in his words, copped it from the supporters. Some of the comments were just so unnecessary. There was some about his weight. Some of the language used towards him was just a bit horrendous. And I mean, they were the bits that triggered quite a fiery response from him. He was kind of pointing at them and telling them to calm down and then pointing back to himself. Just appearing to kind of say, look, it's me. It's on me. It's on me. And I'm not saying that was everyone, by the way. I'm sure it was only a few that were kind of taking it across the line a bit into this kind of unpleasant personal abuse. The rest were rightly venting their feelings, and you've got every right to do that as a fan. If you've paid the money and put in the time and effort, like I say, to go down to the south coast, knowing you've got either a very late night or a kind of a morning back to presumably probably get back for work, or having to take a day off from work, that's absolutely understandable and quite right too that you let your feelings be known. But yeah, it was. He was kind of it's almost like he was saying, "It's on me. It's on me," which isn't entirely true. Other than the players, I think we're feeling the true cost of this period where the club have decided to kind of go teenager crazy and buy loads of 18-year-olds and one 19-year-old, and really only one ready-made player for the starting 11 in Dominic Solanke. All of that just kind of continues to throw the light on the club's ambition to actually compete in the short term. This is what we said at the time. There's this kind of feeling that everyone at the time was like, oh, what a great transfer window. And I don't think anyone was like that. I think we kind of said Solanke's a great buy, a kind of upgrade to the first team and what the team needs. The youngsters are great buys for the kind of the future. But I think at the time, everyone said could have done with some more ready-made players, and especially players in certain positions, left back and left centre back. So yeah, it was never a case that anyone thought it was a great window at all. I remember doing the podcast with Guesty, and I was kind of saying that it was almost like a half to three quarters job had been done, and this feels now like we are starting to, or Postecoglou is starting to see the fallout from that, because it's not a squad sustained to take the amount of hits it's got with, what is currently 8 players unavailable. And I know I said before, most squads can't handle that, but there's definitely, when some of those squads, the players that are available are 18 years old, it's not an ideal scenario kind of thing. And Postecoglou said after the game about the fans, he said they are disappointed, rightly so. They gave me some direct feedback, which I guess is taken on board. I've got no issue with it. I didn't like what was being said because I'm a human being, but you've got to cop it. I've been around long enough to know that if things don't go well, you've got to understand the frustration and disappointment. They're rightly disappointed tonight because, again, we've let a game of football get away from us. That's okay. I'm okay with all of that. And he was asked by someone what was actually said to him. And he said, yeah, probably not for here, mate. And like I say, I really do feel like he's getting absolutely kicked in the backside now by this transfer policy where Spurs have spent, and I was looking at the kind of trying to work out, it's almost £100 million on 5 teenagers who will arrive over the course of 3 windows. And the injuries are exposing the lack of more ready-made senior players that Spurs have got available. And it does compromise yet another manager who's used to lifting trophies. It's what it's doing to him. He's kind of, the key as well is and I get this is a rebuild, and I got some good quotes from him today on that, but he's taken a lot of experience out of his squad and replaced it with real inexperience. I mean, you talk about, Archie Gray, I think only played his first professional game last season, I feel. Lucas Bergvall was just slightly before that. If not roughly around the same time. Wilson Odegaard, ironically, is the one that had that extra bit of experience, and he's out injured for a massive chunk of the season. And then we're going to have Heung-min and Luka Vuskovic, Luka Vuskovic is going to end up being one of the most experienced 18-year-olds ever because he's been loaned out here, there and everywhere to try and get him that experience. But, Heung-min is his first real season in professional senior football. So that's great and it's exciting for the future, but it's not good for the now. It's just it needs to be a part of what you're doing, not the bulk of what you're doing, if you understand. If you understand, it's not rocket science, but you know what I mean. And the experience you've lost, I was looking at, and look, I know these are not players that most of them suited his football, but you've lost the experience of Højbjerg, Lo Celso, Eric Dyer as well, Emerson Royale even as well, coming in, just having that knowledge of and experience of being a Brazil international. And that's not to mention Kane, Perisic, Lloris, players like this as well. And other than Dominic Solanke, they've replaced all of that outgoing experience with 18-year-olds and one 19-year-old. So when the injuries come, and they really have, we've now lost Ben Davies to a hamstring injury. Who knows how long that's going to be? He's out. And he's lost 8 players, a lot of them from the spine of that team as well. You look at that Vicario, Romero, Van der Ven and Bentancur, just that little quartet, bang, right through the centre of the team, and not having the options of Richarlison or an Odegaard to bring in, or even young Mikey Moore to bring in as well. This long-term nature transfer policy is kind of being really exposed by what's happening. It's going to have to be addressed in January, really. Otherwise, it's just going to be like this for the rest of the season. And I asked him today, I kind of put it to him, about this policy of spending on transfer money on so many teenagers. And I just said to him, just straight off the bat, look, you've spent almost 100 million the club have on these players. I know you've owned these transfers. You've always been very kind of clear in saying that if a player is signed, I approved it. And I will be utterly kind of behind that transfer, and I won't have agreed it unless it's the right thing. And I just said to him, but in the short term, it's stuffing you, really, isn't it? Long term, great. Short term, it's not helping you at all. And he kind of was like, well, it's still the right decision. And I own them, these transfers, not the players, because I believe they're the right decisions for this club. I've said numerous times, I make these decisions with the kind of background that I'm going to be here for a while to see this through. To be honest, if I was worried about my own existence, I would have fought tooth and nail to block Harry Kane leaving. But it wasn't the right decision for the club because he was in the last year of his contract. That is not what drives me. The decisions we made around signing young players are the right decisions for this club, for where we are right now, and they will bear fruit. The only slight thing I would say about what he said there is that I would have fought tooth and nail to block Harry Kane leaving, but it wasn't the right decision for the club because he was in his last year of the contract. It might have been not the right decision for the club's finances because they would have lost out on 100 million. Whether it was the right decision for the club in terms of another year with Kane and the Postecoglou team, who knows? They could have ended up getting in the Champions League, getting the associated money with that, getting even more than that. Maybe it's trophy. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder whether that's more a right decision for the club's finances, but maybe not actually being that. And then I kind of pointed out to him all the experienced players he's lost, and he's replaced that with inexperience. And he said, yeah, we have. But we needed to do that. We needed to do that because it was a team that was coming towards the end of its cycle, and we were rebuilding, not just the squad, but the playing style. And you couldn't replace experience with experience because that is not a rebuild. That is kind of topping up because you feel you are close to something, and we weren't close to anything. Again, I get what he's saying, and I think there's a lot right in what he's saying. And I do think if we're allowed to have a Postecoglou year 3 and year 4, that would be great. But unfortunately, there also has to be an emphasis on year 2. And I still don't understand why that couldn't have been done alongside buying ready-made players. I also don't know if I entirely agree with you can't replace experience with experience because that's not a rebuild. Why does it have to be 18-year-olds? Why can't you replace, I don't know, an outgoing 28-year-old with an incoming 23, 24-year-old? You know, someone who has that little bit extra experience, but is maybe more mouldable if that's what he means by younger players. So yeah, I understood a lot of it, and I thought it was a really good answer, and he kind of took it on board quite well, the questions, and dealt with it. This is the thing about, he doesn't like to do press conferences ahead of the next game or for the next game straight after the last one. You might remember, I probably mentioned this before, managers have the option sometimes when it's a tight turnaround of tagging it on the end of the post-match press conference, doing a little separate section. Bournemouth manager did that last night. But Postecoglou doesn't like doing that. He likes to have that little bit of separation between the game and what he says the next day. And to be fair, every time he's done that after a defeat, he's spoken well and given us an interesting insight into kind of everything, the process and things like that. But yeah, it's not great for us. We have to kind of rush back from things. And sometimes if in the European games, we're not going to get back in time. But yeah, it was an interesting answer. There were a couple of little parts of it I didn't entirely agree with, but I definitely understand the whole rebuild element. And definitely that's what he's been overseeing. But you just kind of feel like his hands are being tied slightly. And how many times have we said that about previous Spurs managers? By having to oversee a rebuild rather than a bigger rebuild than maybe he's used to doing, perhaps. And what's not helping him, and I'm sorry to harp on about this again, but I just saw it again last night, is the very little leadership that he currently has from his older players. I think it's kind of, you can get away with having a young group if the older players within it are real kind of game grabbers, drivers in a game, and telling the other players, right, this is what you've got to do. This is how we do it. And James Maddison was wearing the armband last night. Sorry. Excuse me. I don't know if that's the first time I've sneezed in one of these. I think I've sneezed in another one. But I could feel that was coming. It's probably out in the wet and windy Bournemouth, the walk to the stadium. James Maddison was the captain, wore the armband, mostly anonymous. Really, it did a couple of first half nice twists and turns and runs and things like that. But I think he played maybe a ball over into the path of Solanke at one point, I think. But other than that, you probably wouldn't have known he was playing. Sonny came on in the second half. Obviously, he was rested for this game with Chelsea in mind. Little flurry of activity after he came on and put the ball in the net. He was offside. Put Maddison in for a little curling shot that went wide. But then after that, even Sonny kind of went quite quiet again. And they put him in a number 8. Oh, we have a visitor. He does exist. There he is. There you go. He is here. Yeah, I know. You're going to look at me going, you talk about Spurs again. They were rubbish. I know. They really were. Sonny was put in as number 8 as well. Later in the game, which, it didn't suit him. It was very much out of necessity. It looks weird now because you're kind of half in the shot. It's just your head. It looks like I've got some kind of just weird furry thing that I've placed on the sofa. Go back, have a lie down. There we go. Go back and lie down. No, he's very cute. He got his head on my knee looking up at me. So that's your 2 leaders, really. Kind of always said about Sonny, I always feel like he's a leader by example. And if he's not able to do that, then his kind of captaincy is, again, we use that word slightly compromised. With Maddison, Maddison's a bit of a different case. It was only 12 days ago that he was amazing at the Etihad. He was brilliant. He was so good, scored 2 goals, and he was duly telling everyone about it and how, Tottenham's team is better with him in it than it is not. And that's great. But I kind of feel like I could be doing him a massive disservice, and I very much apologise if I am. But I feel like we hear from Maddison quite a lot when he's playing well. We don't hear so much from him when he has a tough day, and Spurs have a tough day. I think I do remember once, there was definitely one occasion I remember him coming out and talking about a defeat. It may have been that he played well in it, or it may have been that he just was fronting up after a game. But I kind of feel like when Spurs don't play well, the likes of Kulusevski are wheeled out to kind of be brutally honest about it. Ben Davies will come out. Sonny will come out as captain and apologise and tell everyone it's going to be better. But yeah, I just kind of feel like with Maddison, he's one of the kind of almost like the equivalent of a fan that sings when they're winning. Kind of is there to tell everyone, yeah, wasn't that great? And I had a great day. I'm really happy. But it's about a team, lads. And then when things aren't going so well, you don't hear too much. And again, it could be doing a massive disservice, and it may well be that these players are just chosen by the media department. It could be a number of things, or requested by the media organisation, the broadcast company. So I could be doing a disservice, but that's just how it comes across to me from the outside. And yeah, because they had to be better on Thursday last night. I'm saying Thursday because some people might watch this on Saturday. Because you could not go into this game lightly, because this is a Bournemouth team that have beaten Arsenal and Man City at home at the Vitality Stadium in the last couple of months. So there was no way Spurs were going to go there and this was going to be like one of those where you could even accuse them of taking it lightly. But they were lacking numbers, but they were lacking energy, but just lacking, I guess, solutions. And as Postecoglou pointed out as well, it can't all be about energy and tiredness, because Spurs kind of chucked it away with that daft goal they conceded only 18 minutes in. That's not about energy. That's about concentration. That is pretty much on Radu Dragićin, really. I keep watching it back, and it looks like he's the man that should have Dean Huijsen, and he just gets away from him. And he kind of goes one way, and he's gone a completely different direction, heads it in unmarked. And I'm not, hiding from the irony that it was a teenager that scored the winning goal after everything we've been saying about teenagers. And it just seemed to knock Spurs for 6. I didn't think they played that badly before it. I didn't actually think they were that bad in the second half. The first half in general. Second half was just dreadful. There was no response. There was no kind of, right, here's what we've got to do, lads. No one, like I said, grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. And I'm trying to think of efforts that Kepa had to save. Probably the most action he had was having to probably save Pedro Porro, who came on as well in the second half, his half volley, which was one of those where on any other given day, it goes through a crowded, busy box and it hits someone and it deflects into the net. But on this one, it just went straight through and Kepa just kind of gathered it. It just didn't make him do enough. Whereas Fraser Forster at the other goal was far busier, and Bournemouth were actually terrible in front of goal. Had Bournemouth been better in front of goal, it could have been a landslide towards the end. They just kind of, at the end, were breaking at will, and Spurs were indebted to, ironically, some good defending. That's the annoying thing about the switch-off, was that, like, Dragićin actually defended quite well in moments. There was a few times when he ushered a striker, a winger, away from goal and did well. There was Archie Gray made a terrific challenge on Kluivert as he was running through. And like I say, Forster made a couple of good saves as well. But it just really lacked anything going in the other direction of any note. And Postecoglou said afterwards, very disappointing. We started the game well, started the game the way we wanted to and started controlling it, but we gave away a poor goal, a really poor goal again. That allows the opposition to, and in a difficult place to come to anyway, it allows them to sit back and play the football they want, to counter-attack, and we have to open up. It is disappointing and it's not good enough. It's not something that's a one-off either. We've done that now 3 or 4 times and paid a price for it. Football is a game where you try to control it and dictate it to play the way you want to. But when you give goals away like we did tonight, We have done that consistently, not just with set pieces, but just in general this year. If everything just shook there, it's because India's just jumped on the floor. Thanks for that, mate. That was really helpful. No, don't drink out of that. He's seen my drinks on the floor and he's about to drink out of my squash. Thanks, mate. Ultra professional, this video, isn't it? Pretty much in keeping with the performance yesterday. Where was I? When you give goals away like we did tonight, and we've done it consistently, not just with set pieces, but just in general this year, it just gives the opportunity then for the opposition, particularly a team like Bournemouth, to play on the counter, which is what they want to do. We have to open up. They can sit back. It's just really disappointing it's happened again. Something for me to mull over and do something about. And yeah, they did. They played into Bournemouth's hands. Because Bournemouth, I was expecting this ferocious pressing display from Bournemouth, like both teams were going to press each other like mad. But Bournemouth, I guess it was slightly rare for them that had a midweek game, kind of in between two weekend games for them. Obviously, Spurs got European football, all of that. And they adjusted to that. They weren't as all out kind of pressing and working like mad. They kind of allowed, and like he said, the goal helped them do that. But it allowed Spurs to have to come forward and open up. And we know what they're like against a low block. And yeah, they dealt with that quite easily, Bournemouth. There were a couple of positives. It's not going to all be complete doom and gloom. I thought Fraser Forster again was very good. I think he's kind of dispelling the whole notion that he was going to be any kind of issue. I think he's been really good, looks sharp now. I thought Destiny Udogie was really good. I actually thought that was one of his better performances. He defended well, and there were quite a few moments when he did actually take charge and took the ball on a bit of a run. Excuse me, got past a few players, and I thought he was all right. Archie Gray took what was thrown at him, I thought, pretty well on the whole. Bear in mind, he's an 18-year-old central midfielder who made his first Premier League start as a right back, and then in the second half has to become a centre back, which he hadn't done until a couple of months ago for the first time. The fact that a £40 million wonder kid who loads of clubs wanted is having to play as a right back or a centre back for Spurs probably also says plenty about the club and their transfer priorities and why they didn't just sign another centre back. Anyway. Like I said, he made that great tackle when he got back to get Cliver. And I do think he deserves credit for kind of taking everything on his shoulders that he did last night. And he is still, everything I've seen has only reinforced the view. He is going to be some player for Spurs in the long term. And I still think probably a Spurs captain as well. I really feel that. But again, it's about the long term. It's not about now. In a similar vein, Lucas Bergvall came off the bench and I thought it was actually a really positive little cameo he had. Came on as the number 6. The players were coming on and Werner was coming on, Bergvall was coming on, Basuma and Maddison were coming off, and I'm thinking, Sarr's already off. Where in the world, what is happening in this midfield? And it ended up that Bergvall was the 6. Kulusevski was the 8 on one side and Sonny was the 8 on the other because Timo Werner was playing down the left. And funny enough, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, a couple of weeks back when talking about who would fill in for Bentancur, Postecoglou, one of the first names he said was Bergvall. And I have seen him in Sweden playing that role, only briefly, I think one half of football in the Djurgården against Bromma-Paikana match at Bromma-Paikana, and he was much better when he moved up the pitch. But I did think, yes, I thought he did well. I think he was quite proactive, nice twists and turns. I always wanted the ball, tried to make things happen and move the ball forward. Kind of playing in a deeper role than probably he's been asked to do at Spurs thus far when he's had these little cameos or when he started in Europe. But yeah, I thought he was all right. And I asked Postecoglou about Archie Gray today, as well as the other questions. I asked him about what did you feel about the way he dealt with everything that was kind of thrown at him yesterday, and he said he'll be better for it. It was a good experience for him. It wasn't easy. It was tough, particularly when we put him in at centre back. But it will do him the world of good, make him a better player and a stronger personality for our football club. And that last bit, I think, kind of feeds into the leadership and potential captain role for me. I do feel like that. And again, I'm saying in the future. I'm not saying right now. There are sometimes some very young captains at football clubs. And who knows? With another year under his belt, 2 years, he might end up being a very young captain at Spurs. We don't know what's going to happen with Sonny. But yeah. And Guesty made a really good point on the podcast earlier today, actually. If you've never listened to it, Golden Guest Talk Tottenham, we do a podcast together. That you see, he's the clever one. He's the one that kind of he knows all the stats and he remembers stuff far better than me. But he made a really good point about the fact that Archie Gray, when you kind of watch him around the club, he doesn't really hang around with the other young players. He hangs around with this little group that is mainly Sonny, Ben Davies, and Fraser Forster, and probably helps contribute to him kind of being old, kind of beyond his years. And I know the reason he's with Sonny is because Joe Roden told Sonny, obviously they're very good friends, to look after Archie when it came to Spurs. And I think Sonny took that on himself. And Sonny's kind of friendship group is Ben Davies and Fraser Forster is a bit of the older head as well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether that kind of rubs off on Archie Gray in the months and years ahead, and whether he does end up becoming a bit of a kind of an older head, as it were, in the team. I mean, having spoken to him a few times in interviews now, he is very much an old head on young shoulders, and yeah, we'll see what happens with him. But elsewhere, apart from those few positives, everyone else kind of spluttered and struggled, and Maddison and Brennan Johnson were both pretty anonymous. The thing with Brennan Johnson, he's had a few quiet games, but he's kind of marked them with sudden big moments. So even against Roma, I didn't think he was particularly great, yet puts the ball in that earns the penalty for Sarr early on, and then obviously lovely finish from Kulusevski. So when he's scoring, you can kind of overlook that, but when he has a game like he did at Bournemouth, he's not contributing any key moments. And yeah, he and Maddison weren't great. Solanke, I felt, worked hard, but it was another one of these games where there's no service to him. This is it. I see kind of people talking about his XG and stuff like that. That's all well and good if people were chucking the ball at him and he was getting chances and all that. Technically, I guess that is what XG is all about. But he's come. It must have been really kind of a stark contrast being back at the Vitality Stadium, knowing kind of how many opportunities he had and the goals he scored for Bournemouth last season, and thinking, I've come to a club in a system that should be furnishing with me as many opportunities as I could feast upon, and I'm barely getting the ball. He did have a couple of moments early on. He had one run where it was actually Huijsen, I think. I don't know why I'm pronouncing it like Huijsen sauce. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it. Huijsen, perhaps. But yeah, I actually thought the defender did well and got across him and slid in and kind of put him off to a degree that he kind of knocked the shot up in the air. But yeah, it was a tough game for him. And even Kulusevski, Spurs have been rubbish. When Kulusevski was the player of the season for Spurs, just was running down kind of blind alleys, just not me. He just didn't know what he was, kind of where everyone was. The movement around it was dreadful as well. Yeah. It was a performance just overall we've seen too many times now. It was a performance we've seen against Palace, against Ipswich, against Fulham, the second half of Brighton. They're kind of racking up the performances where there's not a lot of chances, where they're kind of looking a bit like, oh, what do we do? And there was definitely some moments in the second half where some of those players were just like, yeah, we're not going to win this, which was really disappointing, where you had kind of certain players were really still trying hard, like Kulusevski definitely trying to find a way through, Sonny constantly trying and all that, but there were just some other players that were just like, and Solanke as well, battling away to the end. But yeah, some other players. And I'm not saying it's the players I haven't mentioned, just some of them. And I'm technically slandering all of them by saying that. But yeah, I just kind of didn't feel like the effort levels, I can maybe say it's energy, but I felt it did really fall off in the second half as well. And again, like I said earlier, it was another performance. And I don't think this is just a Postecoglou era. I think this applies to Spurs in general, where Spurs just struggle against the low block, against a team that will sit back. And yeah, they need to kind of find ways around this, because the whole thing with Postecoglou, I still stand by it. The highs have been so high. We've seen what his football can be when it's played properly, and we've seen it 2 wins against City, United away, Villa at home as well. But you probably would also say in all of those games, they were given the space to kind of rip those teams apart on the counter-attack, which we know is a very kind of common strength of Spurs over the years. And I think the key for him is, how do I kind of transfer that to these games that we're playing, whether it's at home or away, where we have more of the ball, like they did last night against Bournemouth, and finding ways through. They have to find answers to that. Again, it may well be that on Sunday, and fingers crossed, hopefully, that Chelsea are not going to sit back and try and counter, and they may well have more of the ball, and that may suit Spurs. but Spurs need to be able to play in different ways. Postecoglou isn't really setting up teams to be counter-attacking sides. In a way, that's the Spurs way, not his way. He needs to find a way to get his way to be the prevalent way, I suppose, or a way that they can do both. Because, all of this, the current malaise in the result is at one win in 6, and the injury crisis and everything. It's going to provide a pretty stern test of nerve for those at the top. We know that they're a panicky bunch. Anytime it looks like the pressure might be on them and fingers might be pointed and people might chant against them, instantly it's like, get him, it's that person. And that really needs to not happen right now because, Daniel Levy and the Cubs board appointed Ange Postecoglou knowing his way was going to involve a major rebuild. They knew that. And they were kind of bringing in one of the big names within CAA base, the agency that's always had this close alignment with Spurs and represents most of their star players like Sonny, Maddison, Porro, Sarr, Richarlison was with them. I'm not sure if he is anymore, but yeah, there's loads and loads of the young players with them as well. So they were kind of creating a rebuild while aligning themselves very closely with this very kind of powerful agency. Positive, probably first summer, I would say. They started to put the changes in and obviously had to react to Harry Kane leaving as well. And yeah, it kind of feels like that was a positive window. And then something happened. Maybe it was a new recruitment team. I don't know. But they changed tack. And they kind of decided to provide Postecoglou with 5 teenage signings. I'm counting Buraval in there as well. I'm trying to think if Vuskovic was that window or the previous window now. But yeah, that policy, with Solanke aside, is looking to the future. It's not looking to the now. And a rebuild has to be partly the future, but it also has to be a rebuild for the now as well. And look, with these teenage players, some more cynical than I might suggest that they're investments. They are the kind of players that, when you're looking to get investment from future stakeholders or maybe even in the future someone who wants to buy the club, being able to say, look at these young players we signed for about £100 million. They're now going to be, or very shortly, going to be worth $500 million to you. But it doesn't work like that. Postecoglou was only saying the other day that only a certain amount of young players bought are going to become the stars you hope they will. For the rest, it's not going to be that easy. There's going to be injuries, there's going to be other issues, whatever. They're not going to make it. Regardless of all of that, these signings have been long-term project ones. So can a completely compromised Postecoglou really be judged on what's happening right now? With 8 players out, with young players given to him, can he have his fate decided by this period when he has been hampered by not only the injuries, but the club's own transfer policy? I find it difficult to believe that you really can. Just what annoys me, I think, about Spurs and the hierarchy, Daniel Levy decisions make, whatever you want to call it, it's just so reactive. They really are. I kind of feel like with these young players, it's like we said before about kind of a criticism of Spurs was that, Brighton are signing that young player who's become a star. Brentford are signing this young player that's become a star. Why can't Spurs do that? And it's almost like Spurs heard that and were like, oh yeah, we can do that. Why don't we sign all these young players? I don't know why they sound like they're a DJ. But we can go and sign these young players. But it's almost like they've taken that and just gone to the extreme. And signed 5 of them rather than concentrating on actually other parts of the team now. And they kind of signed so many of them. They neglected what they needed to do in the present, looking too far into the future. And we know, I've said this so many times, they're so reactive when it comes to managerial appointments. They've lurched from one style to another, just chasing kind of whatever they think they should do, or maybe sometimes even what the fans tell them they should do. We want to win trophies. Okay, quick, get that guy. He's got millions of trophies. Yeah, he'll do. Oh, no, it didn't work. Oh, go for that guy. He plays sexier football. That's what the fans want. Oh, no, it didn't work either. Go back to the trophies. And it's just like, honestly, people at Spurs must be dizzy. They've kind of been chasing what they think people want them to be rather than just creating what they should be and in their own identity. And it kind of feels like Postecoglou is their first real attempt to actually do that, probably since Pochettino. And yeah, it's like, if you're going to abandon his project, as they've done with so many others in the past, it's only really going to throw further light for me on the owners, the chairman, failing in being able to build a football club on the pitch as well as they have off the pitch. It's like the stadium's lovely, the training ground's lovely, that's great. But if you're not building something on the pitch, it's all pretty window dressing really around it. Because, yeah, I mean, for me, oh my goodness, we were trying a couple of reporters, we were talking about afterwards, like, what if Spurs did do it again? What if Spurs did try and hide behind the sacking of a manager again? I don't think any of us would have the energy to go through it, honestly. It's so boring. It's so predictable. It's so what Tottenham do. They are the Poundland Chelsea without the success. They will look for that kind of almost like hiding in the shadows and allowing someone else to be the face of failure. And it's so wrong. It really is. There's only so many times you can blame the manager, especially when you're the one constantly appointing them, as Daniel Levy is. He's gone through 13 permanent managers since he took over the club in 20-something years ago. Was it 22, 23 years ago? There's only so many times you can start again and say, essentially, this is a new project. This is a rebuild. And Spurs have to stick to something. Otherwise, what is the point? We're just watching things go round and round in this boring circle where we can briefly like the odd result, maybe flirt with potentially winning silverware, but ultimately you're back around. It is very much the Roy Hodgson meme, isn't it, of him in the bench going... And that's what Spurs is. It is. They kind of give you hope and they take it away because they don't really know how to see something through. The Postecoglou way has been a rebuild. It is still a rebuild, and it's been painful. As painful as it has enjoyable at times, but that's what a huge rebuild is like. Pochettino warned about this a half a decade ago. This is not this shouldn't come as shocking, amazing revelations to anyone at Tottenham. Oh, guess what? When you rip everything up within a club, try to put a completely different style of football that you've been playing for the last half a decade, it might not run smoothly. It might not be the easiest transition in the world. And add on that, injuries galore. Yes, some may well come from the Postecoglou way of playing, way of training. But again, maybe that is something that the training needs to be a certain way. And I don't know, and players have to adapt to that. Maybe they've been used to easier training sessions. I mean, Conte's were kind of up and down. They were brutal in the pre-season, maybe not so after. And he just did a big snore. He's not an Antonio fan. Yeah, and like I said, Pochettino warned that there was going to be this painful rebuild, and now Spurs are going through it without Kane and with various other issues. Buying 5 teenagers is not going to help you in any way if you're expecting a smooth transition in your rebuild. Yeah, and look, I know some will point out that Postecoglou's won a similar amount of Premier League games to how many Arteta and Klopp won in their first, I think, 50 games or so at Arsenal and Liverpool. And that's something to look at and say it's all part of a process. You could also argue that those two managers reached finals. Arteta won FA Cup as well. So it's not entirely the same. But yeah, honestly, I would not be surprised, let's put it this way, if Spurs were... Because look, it's a tough run coming up. You've got, in the next 5 games, you've got Chelsea, United and Liverpool within these next 5 games. Trips to Rangers is going to be a tough one. The trip to Southampton as well. It's the kind of game that you'd love to say, oh, that's the one Spurs should pick up points in. But that's the kind of game that Spurs have been messing up this season. So, yeah, I mean, and if they fail to hold their nerve, at least even give them to the end of this season, I just kind of feel like a lot of the media are going to really kind of go at the club, go at the way the club's run. And that's not to say we haven't as well. this is this kind of weird thing. I did my talking points this morning, and it's saying a lot of stuff I've said in this video, and it was, talking about the things I've gone over many times that annoy me about the way Spurs are operated, the decisions Daniel Levy makes, and various things. And you could see when like portions were taken on X, Twitter, whatever you were going to call it, like the replies were like, "Oh, Gold's finally calling him out. Gold, oh yeah, oh maybe he's not on the payroll." All this kind of rubbish, and you kind of think, it's so ridiculous. It's like anyone that watches these videos knows these are the things that I say all the time. And anyone that reads my stuff consistently knows that's what I say in these things all the time. But I think people are very selective in what they want to hear and what they want to read and what they just guess they want to believe. And I'm not even just including myself. I think there's a fair few kind of reporters that have criticised decisions made by the owners, a hierarchy, Daniel Levy, the board, whatever you want to call it. And look, I even said it on the podcast earlier. One of the things about Tottenham that is bewildering is that underneath the boardroom level, Tottenham's always kind of chaotic. It's constantly changing. It's being ripped apart. There's constant changes. Everything above that line has stayed the same for more than 2 decades. And it's like, I don't understand that. How can stability at the top not cascade and permeate down to actually making stable decisions with the rest of the club? Why is everything below such a kind of chaotic mess that seems to change every couple of years, when above that's not the case at all? I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it, and I probably never will. But yeah, it feels like a time to me where you've always kind of going to ride through the pain right now. And I truly believe that if Spurs stick with Postecoglou is allowed to kind of feel like he's doing what he needs to be doing, and he's given players in January to help him with the now as well as the future, then I think we'll see what he's trying to do come through this season. Who knows, There's the irony, isn't it? He could potentially maybe win the Carabao Cup. And I think probably a fair bit of the fan base, and maybe even people inside the club, would be happy with that. I don't think Postecoglou would. I think he would be happy that he's ended this trophy drought, but he would want there to be big signs of progress in the Premier League and on the pitch as well. And it is still early days. The table is still bunched. And I kind of feel like, I just think any, again, reactionary decision is just going to bring more pain, another rebuild, that there's no guarantee of that being a success as well. And you look at the managers around, and there's a few ones out there that it would be a big step for them, and it is absolutely no guarantee. We've been down the route so many times before of there's a proven manager, there's one that wins loads of trophies, let's bring them in. Doesn't mean it's going to work at Spurs. Spurs will ruin you. They will. They will absolutely cause nightmares for you. And I even kind of, I was watching Postecoglou after the game in his press conference. Not the one today, when he was a little bit more kind of, maybe not had his mojo back, but kind of something back about him. But after the game, he was so quiet. And he does this sometimes after defeat, when he's almost whispery. And we're like, all the journalists in the room are like, the people at back must have no idea what he's saying. And yeah, he was kind of really whispering into his microphone until he kind of started to grow in volume. And he was asked, I think it was Tom Barkley asked him, if he had a message for those supporters who he's previously said should be allowed to feel whatever they feel. And he said, again, that would be me trying to dictate how they feel. All I can say is I'm really disappointed with tonight, and I'm determined to get it right, and I'll keep fighting until we do. And I believe that. I think he will. But he needs a club that's going to fight alongside him, not fighting kind of maybe in different direction or behind him, pointing, going, oh, if it all goes wrong, it's him. And I just feel that's always been a failing with Spurs is they just panic. They are as panic and reactionary. As soon as the focus starts to turn towards them, it's almost like, who can we throw into the line of fire? And yeah, you've got to give him a chance to truly put in what he wants to put in. I mean, even taking everything away, can you really judge a manager when he's lost 8 players that have ripped through the key players out of the spine of his team? I still even think that alone is enough for him to be allowed to get through this period. At least just give him Van der Ven or Romero back, please, and see how that works. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I know there's some people that have just completely given up on Postecoglou and they're not taking any of that into account. They've just decided it's not for them. I would look at the 4-0 at City and don't write it off as old City were red and rubbish after that. Like I said, they had not lost a game at the Etihad in 52 matches. I would look at the Villa game where they destroyed Villa. A lot of these things, I think I said in the last video, their bad periods kind of started with Spurs destroying them. And United away, absolutely destroyed them. And I feel like there's more of those to come. They've just got to kind of rediscover mojo in a way. And Postecoglou's got to give them more to work with, these attacking solutions that aren't there at the moment. And they've got to get their confidence back. It sometimes, just needs it. Like, even if an early goal last night at the Vitality Stadium was probably a different game. It probably just changing it. It just gives Spurs a little bit of a bounce to their step. And he was asked today, Postecoglou, whether he feels like he's got the support from those above at Spurs. And he said, I don't need support. I don't worry about contracts. I don't worry about support. I just want to make sure that what I set out to do, I accomplish. And that is to bring success to this football club. I will work my backside off to make sure that happens. I'm not going to be deterred in my ambitions or endeavour to do that. And that's what I'll keep doing. But he does need help. He does. It's not a one-man job, this. It is. If one man could fix Spurs, we'd have been fixed a long time ago. It's Daniel Levy and it's Tottenham that need to stand behind him, like I say, rather than pointing at him. That's the only way he's going to do it. And we'll see. We will see. Honestly, yeah. Honestly, I'm not having it. If he is made to be the latest scapegoat of what feels like the Tottenham Hotspur experiment, to kind of send us all into madness. I think it will probably push me over the edge into madness. And like I said, I think there's a few journalists that are kind of sitting waiting for this to happen. I'm not going to use the expression sharpening their knives or anything, but I think the Postecoglou kind of era has shown even more so that even someone, and this is quite a big point as well, wants to be at the club. Because don't forget, Antonio Conte, we can talk about him and whether he got the backing, whether he got the support. Antonio Conte in the last, however many months, did not want to be at Spurs. We know it. He saw the club as a separate thing almost that had let him down and it was their own problem. And, maybe Mourinho in some respects as well. Postecoglou is not like that. Postecoglou is in this. He is up to his neck in Tottenham Hotspur. He wants to be there. He wants to make it work. He wants to, really make a success of his time at Spurs because he believes he can. He's so strong in his beliefs about the way he works and what it brings. And because he's seen it everywhere he's gone. It has brought success if he's allowed to do it properly. And if you've got someone like that at your club who is a leader, let them do it. Let them lead. Follow their lead. Don't just kind of think, someone else will come in and fix it. There's no short-term fix to Spurs. There is no short-term fix to Tottenham Hotspur. It's not a thing. Like I said, someone would have done it thus far. It would not be 60-something years since Spurs last won a league title. It would not be if it was that easy to fix Spurs. What is it, 63 years at this point and a bit. It's, just not the case. Even the lack of other trophies, we know it. Spurs needed to be gutted from the inside out. They needed a massive rebuild. It's happening, and it's utterly painful and rubbish at times. It's beautiful in others, but it's going to be up and down, inconsistent, and the young player element adds to that as well. But at least give it a chance to see if it is going somewhere. As the song goes, nobody said it would be easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy. I can't remember how the song goes now. That's how just run down I am at it all. But there you go. Right, I think that's it really. That's all I kind of really want to talk about. I mean, other than Chelsea game obviously at the weekend, Romero was due to train today, but they weren't really doing much in that respect as a group because there's a lot of recovery work. So he's probably going to be trying to train tomorrow. I think we're at the stage, unfortunately, where he kind of has to be thrown in, really, doesn't he? You would think he'd be doing a lot of work individually on his fitness, but I think you can't shove poor Archie Gray in against Chelsea and who are now the Premier League's top scorers, and kind of just expect him to play as a centre back. Romero has to come in. It does unfortunately mean Dragusin probably moves to the left hand side, which isn't great. Even Archie Gray was playing on the left to allow Dragusin to be the right sided centre back. But I still think Romero, it's a big chance for him to come in and maybe exercise some of the ghosts of last year's game against Chelsea as well, when obviously he got himself sent off as he just turned into an absolute madman. And it's a chance probably to show that some people would say, oh yeah, if it's Argentina, he'd be there on like one leg playing. And yeah, I think maybe a chance to kind of push that aside as well and just be there when Spurs need him, really. In terms of the team, Porro obviously and Son come back in. I wonder whether Maddison ends up getting dropped. Like I said, him and Johnson were equally kind of droppable after their performances last night, but I wonder whether you bring Kulusevski in, have Sarr and Basuma, so you got a bit of legs in there as well. Sarr and Basuma both came off. Sarr even earlier for Sonny. I think it was before the hour mark. I wonder if that's what it is. If it's maybe Romero comes in, Porro comes in, Son comes in, and Maddison comes out. That probably would right. And then you've got Maddison to come off the bench, and you've got Werner to come off the bench as well. And you've got some options then to change it a little bit as the game goes on. But we'll see. Who knows? He might surprise us. It might suddenly find that Mickey van der Venden's in the side. That would be a nice big shock. But I don't. The fact he hasn't mentioned it, unless it is like some kind of big surprise that he's going to be back sooner rather than later. I mean, it was mid-December, but he kind of very much hasn't been mentioning him recently. It's a case of, I think I said before, ticking all the boxes for the medical staff that they don't have any fear that he's going to just injure his hamstring again, which would be an utter disaster. We'll see. We don't want any more utter disasters, please. I can't even say utter disaster. Yeah. I am knackered. Look, I'm not working down the mines. I'm not working as a nurse or a doctor on the front lines in the hospitals. I'm merely covering Tottenham Hotspur. But my goodness, sometimes that feels like one of the most draining jobs you can have. And I'm sure it is absolutely the same for you fans watching around the world. What a team. What a team. But yeah, right. We look forward to Chelsea. We kind of look forward to it. Hopefully Spurs can pull something out of the bag, because that atmosphere in that stadium is going to be rubbish if they don't. And that just it kind of counts against Postecoglou more than anything, because, like I said, the board and Levy will kind of look at that and say, oh, there you go, we can get rid of him now, because everyone's kind of turning on him. And it's just, yeah. It's not the way to kind of run a club. But the best clubs are the stable clubs. I always feel that, and I've always said that, and I will continue to say that. But there you go. Right, time to head off. I'm going to spend all of tomorrow, hopefully, not thinking about Tottenham Hotspur in any way. I would love a day off, which means Spurs will absolutely destroy that with something ridiculous. But yeah, I'm going to have a rest, and I hope you all do as well, and we come back on Sunday and we have something positive happen in our lives, Tottenham lives, and I shall speak about it on Monday, I think. So yeah, fingers crossed, people, fingers crossed. Right, time to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.